Okay, so I'm going to try and answer some of your questions on discussion board one. Didn't get as many questions as I expected because not everybody followed the format. Remember, it's ARCQ, that is answer, choose to answer one of the questions, then respond, that means reading the previous post and responding to a previous post, then comment on anything in the lecture or in the reading, and then ask a question. So follow that format next time, everybody, and I'll have a lot more questions to respond to. Okay, so here's the first question from Jacob, and he asks about our Morse code language and the notion of a fist. With the Morse code language having its own unique variation between people, does this mean that every single coded language has its own unique variation, or is there one somewhere that no matter who you hear it from, the language is used the same way with no variation? I would say no. We're humans, we convey our humanness through whatever kind of symbolic system and medium we're using. So the notion with Morse code was the notion of a fist, so you could actually tell the difference between different Morse code operators by the weight of their fist on the device. It's kind of like musicians who play the same song or the same note even, and you can tell them apart because they've got different touches. Okay, here's a question from Alex. While reading Hornby, I could not stop but to think if an actual professional footballer read this and how they would react to it. There are a lot of fans who are obsessed with sports, but my question is how a professional athlete's obsession with the sport would differ from the fan. Would they be more prone to discuss their obsession with other people than a fan would? Okay, I think it's totally different, and I kind of don't believe that professional athletes are obsessed in the same way. They're obsessed about their own fitness, their own performance, but they don't have the obsession that fans have, in the sense that fans go up and down depending on the result of their favorite team. What athletes, especially soccer athletes, soccer players, are find very difficult is to deal with fans and their obsession. They know that when they're playing in a stadium and the fans are chanting their name because they've just scored, that's fantastic. But when they've been playing badly and their name is being derided, that's incredibly hard as well. So I find it's very hard for athletes to live with that. So whatever obsession they have, I think it's quite different to that of the fans. Um, a similar question on our professional athletes. Peter says, I find it interesting how people deify professional athletes. Why is this so common, and what are some characteristics of an athlete that make them particularly likable or popular? Well, I know I can only speak for myself. When I watch a great player like David Silva of Manchester City, I just love the fact that he has such creativity and movement. It's just magical. And you can name any particular player that you like, and you think, wow, isn't that fantastic? It's a thing of beauty. And it's an escape. It's an escape from all the dumb restrictions that we have in our daily lives. Just to watch that player be so creative like that is just fantastic. Okay, here's another question related to that. Jordan asks, as I talk about obsessions, I wonder, can obsessions ever be taken too far? If so, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Well, yeah, of course they can be taken too far. My grandfather got so depressed when Manchester City lost it, he closed the curtains. Okay, I don't know if you know what that culture that refers to, but there was a tradition in particular homes, especially Irish homes, that if somebody died in the family, you would close the curtains as a signal that there'd been a bereavement in the family. Well, he came home when City had lost, and that's what he did, close the curtains. So I think that's going too far. The only good thing I can say about obsessions is it does provide you with some kind of emotional life. I can't imagine being neutral and being fair all the time. I get a lot out of my emotional investment I put into my team, and when they win, it's fantastic, and of course, when they lose, it's terrible. Somebody has actually pointed out that baseball is an easier sport to follow if you're an obsessive fan, because if your team loses on one day, the next day they might win. But with soccer, football, you have to wait a whole week. It takes you a long time to recover. Okay, next question is from Alex. Alex says, this is Alex Kramer. While reading Hornby, I could not stop but to think if an actual professional football player read this and how they would react to it. There are a lot of fans who are obsessed with sports. I've already answered that question, haven't I? Yeah. Okay, sorry. Let's go on to Cameron. I'm interested to learn more about how sports can unite people across the different cultures and languages. How does a sport like soccer become so important in two different cultures, like the Japanese culture and the Italian culture? These cultures have very little in common, yet soccer thrives in both countries. Yeah, well, I don't think it's probably to do with the differences in culture. It's what unifies people is that they recognize that sport can be incredibly beautiful, and that a great athlete is a joy to watch, whatever your particular culture. In terms of uniting people, then watch the movie Invictus. Coming up, I think it's Unit 8, and that also do the reading there, and that's the story of Nelson Mandela and his attempt to use rugby, the national rugby team of South Africa, the Springboks, to unite the different factions in black and white in South Africa. So next question is from Carl. Can anyone provide other examples of laddish behaviors? And what about girly behaviors? Do you agree what I said above? Okay, well, let's not get into girly behaviors, but laddish behaviors, and that's one of the problems in sport, especially professional sport and soccer, especially in England, is the sexism that can be demonstrated as part of laddish behavior, and how that's often demonstrated against female participants in games. So it's very difficult for a female official to make a breakthrough, I think, in the British game, because of the kind of laddish sexism behavior that would be aimed against female referees in the male sport, in the men's sport. Okay, here's a question from Alex Chu. Is there a specific reason why American sports cultures seems to differ so greatly from European sports culture? Good question. Can't begin to answer that in many ways. Lots of different one thing that strikes me, of course, is, and of course, one question going back to that, is it that different? A lot of people in Europe talk about the Americanization of sports, and the turning of sports into more and more of a spectacle. It is very interesting, really. There's lots of things to say. For example, there's a lot more violence associated with European soccer stadiums than there are with American football stadiums. They tend to be quite peaceful places to go, where people actually can drink alcohol, which in most stadiums in Europe is not allowed at all, because that fuels a lot of violence. One of the big difference I notice is, of course, is the notion of relegation. That if you are, especially with soccer in Europe, if you don't do very well, you get relegated to the lower division. Of course, that doesn't happen in most major sports in the United States. You have a franchise, and you're guaranteed to be part of that particular league, however awful your team plays. I think that is a major difference too. In many ways, the American system is very feudal. It's very protected, whereas the European system is really very much more free market and driven. Next question is from Layali. What do major sports in each culture say about that culture's identity? Coming up, I mentioned this, I think, in Culture and Identity, and again in Sports and Politics, is the notion of stereotypes and how particular sports teams carry particular national stereotypes, which countries project on themselves and other countries project onto them. So the British have always thought of their teams, or I should say the English, as embodying the notion of the bulldog spirit, of fair play. And all those continentals are kind of just not as honest and straightforward as the English are. That's the way they think of their own team. And if you want to think of how they think of other teams, they would think of a team like Germany as being disciplined, as having a system, etc., etc. So yeah, we project onto our sports teams our own conception of our own national identity and what we stereotype other nations to be. Okay, next question is Michael. Um, uh, do you think there is a correlation between sports fandom and gender? What would you think of a man who does not watch or follow upon sports in America? Well, I wouldn't think anything. I just think it was his particular choice. I think there's a lot of sexism here, which suggests that to be a man, you have to follow sports, and if you're a woman, you don't follow sports. Well, I think that's total nonsense, as we know from the success of the great American women's national team in soccer and the huge following they've had, mainly from women. Interesting movie a few years back, an Iranian movie, was all about women supporters of soccer in Iran who are not allowed to go to soccer matches, trying to find their way into a stadium through various trickery. And of course, there's no gender difference really between the desire to follow sports and support a team. In the same way, there's no real gender difference in wanting to participate in sports and being allowed to participate in sports. Okay, I think I've got them all so far. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. If I've missed anybody, my apologies. Next time I'll have more questions to answer. And I may use a different format, but just as to showing you this is a QuickTime movie and you could do this for one of your blogs. Okay, thanks.